opportunity. Okay. Ulla, so happy you're here. I'm gonna put you on speaker view also, so I can get a nice look at what you're doing, and take it away. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael. I am honored to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And like Michael touched on a little bit, I am a TV and film makeup artist. So everything that I do is basically just for TV and film commercials. Very little print. I don't do editorial hardly at all. That's just not where I shine. So basically my research is always for a TV and movie project. Now, and that said, it means that it has to be authentic. And when you are researching for something authentic, you want a authentic 1940s look. You want a authentic 1850s look. What does that mean? What is it that people were doing during that time period? So my process for research starts at looking at what was going on in the world. It is not just, oh, what did people look like? Like Google can be your best friend, but it can also be your worst enemy. Because if you go and Google, let's say 1940s, I want to do a 1940s look. You go and Google 1940s look, and you're going to get a ton of 1940s inspired pictures. And because the way people are able to edit and Photoshop pictures today, it's sometimes very hard to tell if that actually is authentic or if it's just something that was inspired by 1940s. So I always start my process with looking at what was going on in the world. And today I'm going to do two different looks. I'm going to do a 1920s and 1950s look. And I'm going to show you how you can actually easily go from 1920s to 1950s. I know it doesn't sound like that's an easy task, but it actually is pretty easy when you know what goes on, behind the scenes, what was going on in the world and what the products were, and how people viewed themselves. It's funny that you said, Michael, in the 1920s to Beatles juice. We wanted to look like 1920s, but Beetlejuice added to it. Because the look that I'm doing today for the 1920s, and I'm going to start the research part here for that. So in the 1920s, I think the flapper is the most obvious option. Everybody thinks flapper. Well, what was going on in the world when flapper was happening? It was right after the end of World War I. Prohibition, there was no alcohol, so people were rebelling. But that flapper look actually already went out by 1925. So then we have half the decade, actually more than half the decade, where the look was not flapper. So I am not doing flapper. I am doing, after flapper went out, there was a look called Parlo Mortis, which literally translate to appearance of death. And people like that that very grim light skin, not a whole lot of color, very obvious popping features, eyes and even lips were super red. And that inspired the 1980s heroin chic look, which was used for Beetlejuice. So there's your connection to 1920s and Beetlejuice. So this is like just stuff that it's in my head because I've been doing this for so long. So you really need to know your history when you're doing period looks. And for research purposes, you want to look at what kind of products were used so that you can create that authentic look. Now, when you get to the modern products, that's where your inspired look comes in. Like you can basically create these looks with anything that you have in your kit, because our kits are so versatile today. Whereas say 1920s, there was not a whole lot of options for your makeup. There was no foundation. People didn't have foundation yet. How they created foundation was they slapped on a whole lot of moisturizer and powder a lot over it. But you don't want to do that in today's environment, because first of all, on HD cameras, you're going to see all that. It's going to look too heavy. So you have to kind of go around those, but you want to know how they created the look so you can create the closest possible result so that it looks authentic. And so you want to look at the history, what was going on in the world. You want to look at the products that were used. You want to look at this this character that you're doing, because it is, if it's a period, it is going to be a character. It's not like, oh, I'm going to be doing 1920s for the rest of my life. That's just going to be who I am. You're going to be doing a character. So you want to know, who is this person? Where are they coming from? Because I can guarantee you, in the 1920s Africa, somebody living in a hut, or somebody living the glamorous Hollywood life in the golden age of Hollywood, those two people will look completely different. So you also want to know, where is this person? Who is this person? And how does that history relate to your character that you're creating? And so I am actually going to bring in my model now. I'm going to show you how I would be doing makeup first with my PPE on, and then I am going to show you how we're going to do the 1920s look first, and then I'm going to turn it into 1950s. So if anybody has questions right now, let me know, and then I can move on to the demo part.
I'm just unmuting. I just want to emphasize to everybody that I think this is really interesting. I think that in fact, I think when Ulla and I were speaking about this session, and she said 20s, I was like, oh, like flapper. Like, I think you're right. We automatically get into flapper. We automatically think Marlene Dietrich for a period. We automatically think Farrah Fawcett for a period. And not only do we have to be considerate of who is this person and what would they be doing and what kind of makeup would they have on, because Farrah Fawcett didn't really represent what everyone in her decade looked like. Brooke Shields' brows weren't actually on Mrs. Smith. You know, there were no people walking around day to day in flapper makeup. It was a costume. So I think that for our artists who, as you know, Ulla, run the gamut from bridal to editorial to all kinds of different areas, I think it's important to really learn how to not only ask the questions for the creative director or the producer or the bride of, well, do you mean traditional flapper 20s, or do you want more realistic 20s? And I think when you're breaking down a character, which is a different program, breaking down a script and breaking down a character, for film and television, there's an authenticity that's built in because that character did have a job. That character was a baker. That character was a policewoman or a man in the 20s. I think it's really important for us to understand not only that has a perspective and a variance and what it means, but when you can say to a creative director or a photographer or a producer or someone who's a fashion show or a bride, well, there's a traditional 20s flapper look that you might be thinking of, but there's also this 20s. And it just, not only is it great because it helps you fine tune what they actually mean, but it also makes you look so fucking smart. Like they're like, wait, there's more than just flapper. And you're like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Let me do a Pinterest board, or let me send you some pictures. And it layers in this level of expertise, which is amazing. So I really want to thank you for bringing that up, because it is a big difference for people. No questions, just lots of gratitude. So did one question from Sheila. She said, how do you know what color? This is a great one. When you're researching and you're finding work that is really early on in the 20th century, how do you know the color choices to use if the photos are black and white?
That's a great question. That is where you become a historian. You have to start reading about what kind of cosmetics they used. There is documentation all the way back to ancient Egypt and what kind of colors they used and what kind of, how they were mixing all these products. So if you can find, I'm actually going to show you a book that I love. It's called Classic Beauty. This is like a period Bible. And Gloria Hernandez, who wrote this, she's a makeup artist and a historian. So she really knows her stuff. But this is a great book for like in general information about makeup and products and things like that. And timeline also.
Are there other resources, Etsy, and then Wendy called it out, and people are like, Etsy asked a question, Etsy asked a question, Etsy asked about a book. I know, I saw it. Relax, guys, I saw it. Are there, besides that book, are there books that you recommend, or do you prefer old magazines and things like that? What helps you? And also, again, like, are there books that talk about pre-20th century, before photography, and where you couldn't see images in magazines? What resources do you recommend?
I actually love old makeup guides. Like there's makeup guides how women were supposed to put their makeup on, and like from 1910s that were written for women who were well off. Of course, they were wives in the beginning of 19th century. They were not working or anything. But so there are makeup guides. There are printed versions. They're not easily available. But I guess I could offer it because I have them in PDF form. So I guess I can offer them as a. No. Okay. No. No. I did not say that. Okay. Forget it.
Well, they're also copywritten, and I'm not going to get you in trouble for passing around copywritten properties. The other thing I want to recommend to everybody is, the Strand in New York, which was an amazing store, or any store that sells like any kind of old film books or Hollywood books or old magazines of advertising, or there's even books about old advertising, and you don't need the magazines themselves, but there are so many places and so many great resources. We have an incredible library of books at the Powder Group. When we had our studio, we had them all available. We only use them for some of our programs now, but you can find them in used bookstores. You can find them all over the place. I usually say, like, when you look at film makeup, it is a character, but in many cases, that character is echoing the real look of a real woman during that time. You look at Breakfast at Tiffany's, she was a bit extreme because she was overly perfected. But when you look at the street scenes in that movie, when you look at these things, you really get to see, what did a woman walking down the street, what did a woman at a party look like? And so it's not necessarily the books about celebrities. It's not Clara Bow. It's not Farrah Fawcett. It's really understanding, looking at the background performers in a book about Hollywood, or looking at the background performers in a film. One other question I have for you, Ulla, because I think, again, if you're using books as a reference, that's amazing. If you're using true research about the historical time, but when you get back into periods in the 19th century, films about those periods, films about ancient Egypt, Cleopatra, Caligula, these films don't truly represent what the makeup was. They're theatrically based. So how does one look at period makeup in that capacity and understand how to make that differentiation?
I actually never look at films ever. Like, movies are completely out of my research. Documentaries, yes. I love to watch documentaries because you see the true scenes and what the streets look like and what the people look like on those. They, of course, from early 1900s, they're not very high quality images, but you get the idea, because it's not, even for makeup artists, it's not always just the face, how the makeup looks on your face. It's about different shapes, how our hair and your face, everything, how it was all put together, and how the shape looks like in the grand scheme of things. So, and I always also do research with the costume designers and hairstylists, and then we have the producers and the directors come in. So it is really a group effort. So I don't get to decide by myself that, oh, this is how she's going to look like. No, it's a group effort. And I love going to museums, especially costume museums. Those are great places because you can kind of get that idea. Even when you see somebody's clothes, you can get an idea. Oh, I think that this is what they would do with their face. And then you start searching. And Google, even though it can be a horrible resource, it can be a very, very good resource for you too, because you can, one little trick I have is if you Google authentic in front of anything that you're searching, you usually get better results than 1920s makeup. If you Google authentic 1920s makeup, that's a lot better option.
That's great. One question before we jump into makeup. I think that first off, a great suggestion from Pauline. Old family photos or historical photos
Yes.
are great too. But also there was a question about brands that do a really good job with period makeup, or brands that are your go-to brands for period makeup. I do want to note to everybody, I think most of our community knows a company called 3 Custom Color Specialists. 3 Custom Color Specialists, they're based in P-Town now. They were in New York for years. Chad and Scott own that business, and they have one of the most extensive, I think it's literally the most extensive beauty library of shade selection, especially with lipsticks. So if you are looking for a 1920s lip color or a 50s lip color, or the original L'Oreal fill in the blank of the name, they can recreate it for you. They create custom color. So that's a great resource for people. But are there brands that do something very, very like that you are their go-to for, like either their liner or something else?
Well, I tend to use primary colors just because I mix a lot of my own colors, and I'm going to show you on the 1920s. I mixed the blush because there's just no blush that's going to work. But anything matte, basically. If you're thinking about until 1970s, anything matte. You don't want to get into too much shimmers because it just wasn't used in cosmetics in the extent that it is used today. And of course, everything today is shimmery or glittery and things. So anything matte. So I don't really have a makeup line that I go to. I like my primary colors that I can mix, and then anything matte. And so I have the Vice Art palettes that are matte. I really like those.
Awesome.
But 3 Custom Colors is awesome. I love their products too.
Great. Then they're great guys too. Let's see some makeup.
All right, let's do some makeup. Okay, I am going to put my gear on so that you can see what I would look like working. You can sit down, Lexi. So this is my beautiful model, Lexi.
Hello.
You're adorable.
They're saying you're adorable. I have my little AirPods on,
good,
so
okay.
she can't hear you. But this is how I would look like if this was a real set. But since we've been quarantining together, and it's kind of hot in here, so I'm happy I don't have to wear this. Okay, and I already did her hair a little bit to kind of give you an idea of, I can move you a little bit closer. There you go. I already did her hair so that we kind of get an idea, like I said, about the shapes. So the hair shapes were completely different in 1920s and 1950s than what they are today. And having this kind of shape on the head, even if you're doing makeup, it helps you kind of imagine where you're going to go with this makeup. And so for the Paloma Mortes, for our beautiful deathly appearance, we're going to use very light foundation. I'm not going to go completely like crazy white on her. Just lighter than what she usually would be. Alexa, do you have any moisturizer on your skin?
No.
No. Okay. So she doesn't have moisturizer, which is kind of awesome. I'm going to do a quick skin prep, which I always would do anyway. Even when people tell me that, oh yeah, I cleansed my skin before I got on set. Not that a lot of actors do, but even if they say they have, I still like to make sure that the canvas is clean. And this is something that it probably will change now that we have to be very careful and wear all the PPE clothing and things. But I used to apply moisturizer with my fingers, and because Lexa is my niece, I'm doing this with my fingers again. I don't know how we're going to do this in the future, but this always helps my actors relax. It's just like a little treat right before they have to get on camera. And I do the same thing with eye cream. And generally I would have a mirror right in front of me so I would see what I'm doing. Okay. And I did a little test run with Lexi on Sunday, so I actually have already matched the foundation and I know how much lighter I'm going to go. Michael, do you want me to talk about the products I'm using, or?
That'd be great if you don't mind.
Okay, I don't mind. So this is Danessa Meyer's foundation. I love her foundations because they're so versatile and they're very easy to blend, and the coverage is awesome. And also, because in the 1920s, the look was very matte, and they used, like I mentioned earlier, what they did used a lot of moisturizer and then put a lot of powder over it to get that super light look. This foundation works great for that too, without me actually putting a lot of moisturizer and then powder over it. So if you're doing somebody, if you're doing a 1920s makeup and you want to do this ghostly light look, make sure you don't go more than 2 shades lighter, because if you go lighter than that, then it's just going to start looking like Halloween makeup, and that's not that's not where you want to go. Let me turn this way a little bit. Close your eye. You can turn back that way. Just look straight. There you go. Okay, we're almost done with this foundation. Look up for me, please. Of course, when you're going lighter, you really, really want to make sure you blend everything in super well so that you can see it in the ear, the difference in the ears or in the neckline. Okay, you can scoot a little closer so everybody can see what the lovely death leaf.
Ulla, that's beautiful. And I think a question that I would have is, because there wasn't a lot of texture until later in the century with regard to foundation sheen and shimmer, things like that, or what about highlighting and contouring in a period like the 20s or 30s or 40s? Was there a lot of that in the same way as like we're baking and strobing? I hate those words, but like, do they do the same sort of restructuring with foundation and as they did then, or was that really only in color application afterward?
That was really mostly color application. Now, the interesting thing about that is that until late 30s, early 40s, when we started getting color TVs and color film, and everything was black and white, they had to do heavy contouring and highlighting. But those were done with colors like green, blue, and purple, because the cameras didn't read red at all. So everybody's lips, for example, used to be green. And that also makes it difficult to try to recreate exactly what they look like on a screen, especially if you're looking at 1930s movies. It's hard to try to recreate exactly what they look like because it was done completely differently. All right, make sure I get the hairline here. Okay, so before I go and powder this, I'm going to do a couple of things. Now, in 1920s, they used black on their eyebrows. And the products that were used in the 1930s, of course, we don't have them available anymore, and you don't even want to, but they used mostly pencils on their eyebrows and their eye as an eyeliner. And also what they did with their eyebrows, they trimmed them super, super thin. So they were basically completely plugged off. So they only had a very tiny, tiny line. And then they added castor oil to make them shiny. I'm not going to do that today because we don't need to create authenticity to that extent. And let me grab a brush here too. Now, of course, Lexi has very nice 2020 eyebrows. And eyebrows back in the 1920s were thin. And they also arched down because we wanted, well, I'm talking about the past 1925, where they wanted to make things kind of sad. They wanted to make it look almost appear doll-like. So I'm going to show you how you can create, even if you have really nice 2020 eyebrows without me shaving or plugging her eyebrows completely. I'll show you how you can make these eyebrows work for 1920s. So I'm making little strokes with my black pencil. And I am starting right on the top here. And I'm making these strokes to go down. Just step back here a little bit. And if you turn to the side, you see how it creates that downward, kind of a sad look right there, without making it too thin in the and I don't have to plug her eyebrows because I kind of just brush them into that shape. I'm going to turn a little bit this way. I'm going to do the other side. So this is also where, you know, your anatomy studies come in handy, because you will know how to create shapes. One thing that I love to study and look at is sculpting, because it also helps you with creating these shapes. Even a little bit more. You see the eyebrows? You can turn a little bit on from side to side. So I basically just colored the very, you can look in the camera, the very top of the eyebrow here, went in the middle and kept it going downwards here. Then I, with the little mascara wand, I just gathered all her own eyebrows to the middle. So you brush them down from the top and brush them up from the middle, from the bottom, to create that shape.
So one of the key things there is definitely going to be that the thinness at the end.
Yes.
And you know, we've all seen brow cover. You know, Jake did a great drag session. We watched him cover brows.
Mm-hmm.
How would you recommend someone, you know, if you're doing a bride or you're doing someone and they have a fuller brow, how could you create this sort of effect? Maybe it's just an interpretation because it can't be exact, but
Yes.
what are some ways you can do that if you're unable to create that perfect shape?
I would, if you're doing it for a bride or something, like, okay, if this was done for a movie, I'm sure the actors would be fine shaving her eyebrows. But if your bride just wants to keep your you know, the eyebrows exactly the way they are, I would probably just leave the eyebrows as they are and create the look, the inspired look by the shape of the eye and shape of the lip, rather than trying to go in and, you know, force it to something that it won't be. Okay, so next, I'm going to finish that off a little bit more. Next, I'm going to use the same pencil around the eye. Close. So they smudged kohl around their eyes. And kohl is, I'm sure everybody knows here what kohl is. It's been used for centuries for makeup purposes. So I'm basically first just doing these. Can you turn a little to me? Thank you. Just getting into the eye lash line here. I'm basically just doing a regular liner. Just on the top on this part. Now I'm going to take a matte gray eyeshadow. And the important thing here is that it's matte. There was no shimmers back in 1920s. Close yours. Turn just, thank you. And I'm going to smudge this line with a gray, matte gray eyeshadow. And in the 1920s, they wanted the eye shape to appear very, very round. So they left the middle part of the lid very light. So it's almost like you draw a circle with the eyeshadow. Where you usually would do the crease, that's where the eyeshadow goes, and it just goes down perfectly with the eye shape. This creates even more of that dull look. You want to keep these eyeshadows very soft. Soft and blended.
Ulla, what brush is that?
These are the Royal Royal and Langnickel Omnia brushes that they so generously.
Oh, those are great.
Yeah, these are fantastic. So I just got these from our sponsor. Please make sure you thank our sponsors. And I'll look up. So now I'm going back with the same eyeshadow just under the eye. And it's you line the entire length of lash line.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt again. I just want, what is the actual brush? What's the number of the brushes they're using?
The brush, it's called BOM, BOM 435.
BOM 435.
Yes, and then the
One.
blender is BO, yeah, that's the small one, and the big one is BOM 410. And now you can scoot forward again, Lexi, for me, and you can actually close your eyes. I'm going to turn you on. Can everybody see that? The shape of the eye, that's very important here. Okay, thank you, Lexi. You can go back. And now, before I add mascara on her eyes, I'm going to do blush, and I want to do the powder too. So because there really isn't a cream blush that I have found that looks great for this time period, I'm using cream colors from a primary color palette to mix it. So I just have white, red, and yellow here that I'm going to mix to make the correct color. And colors in 20s, they were more pure than what they are today. And I think that's one of the reasons why we can't find the colors that look exactly what they did back then. And the blush was, smile for me, please. The blush was really to give you more of that doll look again. So it was just kind of a rounded hint of color. Women who didn't have money, they used to pinch their cheeks to make it appear more flushed. Just step back so I can see it. You can stop smiling. Okay. Just getting tired of smiling. Here we go. And then now I'm going to powder this whole thing. And I'm using loose powder, RCMA translucent powder is it's been my go-to powder for 20 some years. And I'm going to use a powder puff because I really want to get in there and make it matte. Turn a little this way for me, please. Thank you. And Lexi's lashes are really long, so I'm going to get a little bit of powder on them too, just to have a little bit more mascara stick to them. Because in 1920s, they used wax beads on their lashes. And although we don't necessarily want to have a beaded look, especially when you're doing work for camera, you still want them to look less defined than what lashes you really are today. All right. Look down for me, please. They didn't really put mascara on their bottom lashes because of the products that they used. So I'm going to add just a little bit of mascara on the top. I'm not, I don't know if anybody noticed that I got a little bit of mascara right there. I'm going to show you a little trick how to get it off easily. Although many of you probably already know this. And mascara back in the 1920s, mascara was always black. There was no color options. All right, now you can scoot in a little bit again. You can turn around, turn from side to side so everybody can see how the shape looks. All right, thank you. And the last thing for this 1920s look is the lips. And that's probably the most important thing because they were very specific shape. And I'm actually using the same red that I got from my cream color palette. I'm using the pure red as the lips. I don't like using liner for this, just because the shape is so different. So they like to really define this Cupid's bow. Can you change the tab this way? That's probably a little too much. There you go, perfect. So I like to line with my brush and the lip color that I'm using. Don't drink too much coffee while you do this, or before you do this. And then I usually do this middle part. So they overlined the middle part of their bottom lip, extended thin lines. Oh, underlined actually, it's probably the better word. Underlined the sides of the mouth. Can you put your chin up a little bit? Thank you. Give me a big smile. One thing with red lipstick, always ask your model to give you a big smile so you can see where you didn't get the color. Because I guarantee they're gonna smile when you're not around, and then they see like, oh no, there's missing lipstick. Okay. Don't smile. Okay, let me step back. All right, we're done with the 1920s. You can scoot a little forward and then turn your head to side to side.
That's beautiful. I think
Thank you.
one of the things that I look at this and I think to myself, again, this being redundant, we go back to, sorry, hang on. I mute all again. I'm gonna need you to unmute yourself again. Or Annette, can you mute yourself? I can't mute you from where I am. Let me see. Sorry. Okay, there we go. So one of the things I think that we look at, if this look is so traditionally 20s, I think the brow really stands out in the lip. But what I'm taking away from it is really that energy of softness and the mateness of it overall. And it's not dramatic in the way that we automatically view 20s because of cinema, right?
Yeah.
That's an important factor. And I think that's a big deal. Anne-Louise had asked in the questions, whether you think that period looks are influenced by movies. Like, did a period like the 20s look at film and then go, oh yeah, we want to do that? Or is it the opposite? Does what's happening in real life? Who's creating that iconic period look? Is it celebrity in film, or is it happening in real life and they just emulate it? Where does it come from?
I think it varies. Like 1920s and 30s definitely was highly influenced by Hollywood because that was the golden time of cinema. But then, going to 1960s became the hippie movement, which, it was a real life movement, and people started not shaving their armpits, and they didn't want to trim their eyebrows anymore, and they wanted to be supernatural, and that is definitely, so it really varies, like where all this comes from. And it's going to be interesting to see how is COVID going to affect what kind of trend are we going to see in 2030,
It's all going to be about what looks good on video. Because we're all going to be in front of a camera. Awesome, that's great. All right, cool. I know you want to move on to your other one. We're just coming up on an hour, so you have plenty of time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to 1950s, and I'm going to give Lexi. Let's get the lipstick off your lips. And I actually don't have to change this a whole lot, even though you would think that this is, just not a good lot to go into 1950s. But in 1950s, we started to see a lot more color. We started to see a lot more options of color, and there was but at the same time, people who were into high fashion still wanted to wear a foundation that's lighter than their own skin. So we can still go with this super light foundation for looks. So all I really have to change is the lips. And I'm going to clean up these eyebrows because the eyebrow shape will be completely different. And I can even do the eyeshadow. I can even do that over the shadows that we have. So 1950s, again, it was, there's so many different looks that it really, when you start doing research for 1950s, you want to be sure that you are researching the correct time period. And I am going to, today I'm going to do Elizabeth Taylor inspired look on Lexi. She kind of has that, Lexi has that film star face, right? I'm gonna go back and correct this foundation. Oh, and I forgot to show you the mascara thing, how to clean the mascara. Let me do that right now. So if you ever hit mascara anywhere by accident, you wait till it's all completely dry and you go over with the Q-tip and it comes right off. It's that simple. I'm also going to go over this blush a little bit with new layer of foundation, just because it's going to be different. So I actually kind of like that 1950s they introduced blue and green eyeshadow. I get to do blue eyeshadow. And this time I'm actually going to powder this before I add anything. It was, looks were still very matte in 1950s, but they had options. They had foundation, they had liquid foundation, they had cream foundation. They had different types of powders. Very common powders in 1950s were pink and ivory powders. Some women like to use a darker foundation and then a lighter powder to add dimension. Okay, let's get into the brows. And this time I'm using the Senna brow palette because it's my favorite. Although in 1950s, they still like to use pencils. I think for this shape, and because Lexi already has such great brows, I'm just going to use the powders. I'm using the brow pomade first to create that shape that I want. And the shape for 1950s was fuller brows with a super sharp arch, and the arch was almost right in the middle of the eye. So completely different from what I did with 1920s, where I was pushing everything down from here and everything up from here. Now I'm kind of trying to push everything up so I get a fuller brow. Again, it just comes to that shape that you try to create. Any questions right now, Michael?
Sorry, unmuting myself. Nope.
That's okay. No questions.
Lots of compliments about how beautiful the makeup is.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And well, Lexi's a great model. So,
She's pretty, you're very lucky.
right? It's easy to do when you have a pretty model. Lexi's always so willing to help me out too. She's been my model on several things.
So that definitely is a thicker brow. Is there
Yes.
a difference? Did you get to net more, and maybe you said it and I didn't hear it, but were they working from a natural brow color standpoint? Because you said in the 20s it was much darker, it was more of a black. How did that?
So yeah, so the brows in 1950s were a lot fuller, and they usually worked with the natural brow color. Now I'm recreating kind of that Elizabeth Taylor look with the blue eyeshadow. So I'm making her brows a little bit darker than what they are. But yeah, so at the same time, you want to create more a fuller eyebrow. And luckily, Lexi has really nice brows. So just by pushing everything up helps me make it look fuller. But I'm also adding a little bit of color on the top. And you can see just with doing this one brow, how the 1920s eye doesn't look like 1920s anymore. It's like almost the entire 1920s just disappears just with that eyebrow shape being changed. But in 1950s, eyebrows were definitely really, really well groomed too. And again, it's you know, when you research what was happening in the world in 1950s, early 50s, we're coming out of still coming out of World War II. Women started to want to look prettier because they had been also working in the 40s, helping the country. So they wanted to start paying more attention to themselves and getting facials and things like that that were again possible after World War II. Okay, so now I'm going to do the eye with the blue eyeshadow. It's actually kind of a green blue eyeshadow. It's a Vice Art palette because it's matte. Again, there was no shimmers yet in 1950s. This actually works really well for me because the middle part was left light in the 1920s. So now I'm just dabbing on this color. Again, blending is very important. Even though they preferred these blocks of color, everything was very nicely blended. And they, of course, for Elizabeth Taylor, it was winged outwards. Yeah, perfect, thank you. And the eyeshadow is just on the top lid. Turn a little bit, thank you. We're getting very far from 1920s now. It's 30 years later. Okay, now I'm going back. Oh. I'm going back with the same black eyeliner. Just adding a little bit more liner in here so that it's not quite as blended. Also bringing it out a little bit.
What pencil was that again?
This is Crayolan pencil.
What color?
Black.
It's called black. Okay.
Yes, it has 065 on it. Okay, let me see, open your eyes. Perfect. And now look up for me. And then I'm going underneath here just to kind of tight in the outer corner. And just a little bit towards me. So you don't want to line all the way at the bottom. Just kind of want to tie to the lash line. You can scoot forward and we have the 1950s brows and eyes ready. Now I'm going to do the blush. Blush is not very exciting or difficult in this look either. It's more of a peachy color blush that they used, and it's a very natural blush too. So it's basically what we do with the blush today. You add a little bit of contour with it. And the last thing for 1950s, and again, very important, is the lips. And for this one, I'm going to use a little bit more orangey red. Still red, but a little bit more orangey red. And this time I'm going to line Lexi's lips, but I always like to use a colorless liner. This is Makeup Forever colorless liner. See, unfortunately, you won't see what I'm doing here, but. And just adds that extra layer right there so the lipstick won't bleed.
Ulla, I don't know if you know an answer
Yes.
to this question, but while you're prepping that, would like these looks for a woman to do on herself, to Smith as she get ready, do we know, like, what is the time that it would take? Was this about pampering? Was it about getting ready quickly? You know, today we want to go very quickly and get our makeup done fast because we've got to get out the door. How long would a makeup take for an average woman of the day?
It took them over an hour, and they started with a bath that usually took an hour. So it was definitely about pampering. So, and there's you can go to YouTube and actually look for videos about 1950s women getting ready, and they're hilarious and they're amazing. And like, I wish I could do that. You know, take an hour bath and then put on my skincare while somebody does my hair.
Sounds good to me.
Right? So in the 50s, the lips were definitely fuller, slightly overdrawn. Again, the Cupid's bow was very important. Her lips are very dry, so I'm going to put this on the bottom lip just to give her a little relief right there. Let me turn just a little bit this way. Thank you. And although most of the lipsticks in the 50s were matte, there was also some shinier, not no shimmer, but it was more like a glossy liner, lipstick. Okay, give me a big smile.
While you're starting to finish this look up, I just want to remind everyone, if you're just joining us, the reason that Ulla is not using PPE for this session is that she has been quarantined with her niece. So we do not require her to use PPE since she's not been using PPE in their daily interactions. So just in case anybody joined us after that was discussed.
All right. Here we go. We have 1950s.
That is a wow.
So how long did it take me?
I mean, you changed her over in 20 minutes.
Yeah. So when you learn the history of makeup and you know what kind of products they use, you can do this very quickly. So if you have a director who says that, yeah, you know, I think we're going to go with the 50s instead of 20s for this look, you're like, okay, I got it.
You love those directors, don't you?
I do.
This is great. There was one other question. Sorry, I'm trying to get off to my other screen. Okay. There was another question. When you brought the director up, or a creative director, maybe even, you're trying to share an idea and communicate. Mm-hmm. A lot of people use storyboards, maybe Pinterest. What are the tools that you use when you're trying to communicate how you're going to create a look or what your ideas are?
Well, usually we have to do a face chart. We have reference photos from different, from different periods. And because I usually don't work alone, I will have my costume designers and hairstylists there with me. And we usually agree on things before we bring them to a creative director or director. So we're showing them as a united front, and it's easier usually to convince somebody to if like their idea is completely different, but that hardly ever happens, really.
Amazing, amazing. Ulla, absolutely amazing. And you make it look so easy. I think I might start doing makeup, but
you should.
There's a lot of people shaking their head. No, don't do it. Thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing. Lots of great comments in the chat, and I hope you'll check them all out later about how gorgeous everything is and how amazing it was. Oh, I like that picture. Stay right there. Gorgeousness, gorgeousness, gorgeousness. First of all, so mad that you have such an easy face to work on. We're going to make it harder for you.
Right.
Absolutely gorgeous. Thank you. Please thank your niece for us. We so appreciate it. And I just want to remind everybody that our sponsors for today are Who. I hope you remember. We have Scandinavia. We have Cinema Secrets, The Makeup Light, Senna Cosmetics. We have Royal Manical, and we have Scandinavia. So the reason we're here, the reason that we get these free sessions, make sure we're grateful. Thank you, Ulla, for being with us. Another reminder to everybody, if you're joining us for Lasagna Guntner at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific, we will keep this session live, and you can just lock right back in, jump right back in on this. But I'm going to shut the video on my end off and the audio. So I will be back on just before 4 o'clock. Thank you again, Ulla. See everybody in about 40 minutes.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks,
you. Thanks, guys.
Bye.